All right. Ladies and gentlemen, how the heck are you? We're getting ready to go live here. I'm going to have to hit the mute button in just 1 second. We have a legend with us today, ladies and gentlemen. An absolute legend. In 3, 2, 1. All right. Rex Bear, Leak Project. John Hogue. This guy is an absolute legend. Seriously. He's been on Discovery Channel, History Channel, written multiple books, and he is spot on with his predictions. What we're going to be discussing is the Great American Eclipse, the earthquake and tsunami possibilities, his worldwide astrological predictions. Trump strikes Syria and North Korea is a work that he is, I don't know if it's came out yet or it's coming out here in just a moment. And also Nostradamus and the Antichrist, codenamed Mobus. Now, for those of you that haven't heard of John before, I'm sure most of you have. He is a rogue scholar, world-renowned authority on Nostradamus and other prophetic traditions. His work is critically acclaimed for cutting through the social, religious, and nationalistic projections of prophets and their interpreters. Now, also a futurist, accurate forecaster, and creator of HogueProphecy.com, which is termed the Huffington Post of prophecy websites. Mr. Hogue has received wide international recognition, appearing on over 150 television and 1,000 blog and talk radio shows on 5 continents. Wow, what a resume. Now, check this out real quick. This is an excerpt from the Great American Eclipse, Earthquake and Tsunami. Total solar eclipses seem to trigger seismic events upon the lands and seas their shadows touch. On 21st of August, 2017, the lower 48 states will have a solar eclipse draw its mysterious darkness of 90 to 100% totality over 4 of some of America's most dangerous seismic and tsunami-generating quake zones. They are the Cascadia subduction zone, the Pacific Ocean along the Oregon, Washington, and British Columbian coasts, and dormant supervolcano Yellowstone National Park, which has been acting crazy lately, ladies and gentlemen. It's been going off the charts. So it is going to be very interesting to see what happens based upon recent patterns over the past 20 years. If there's repeated events, it could get hairy very, very fast. John, it is an absolute honor to speak with you. How the heck are you? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, doing pretty good. I just released that book this weekend, The Great American Eclipse, Earthquake and Tsunami. And to answer your question you put out in the beginning, the Trump book was an unexpected literary child that I had to birth in 3 weeks, to birth a 55,000-word book after Trump struck Syria. At the same time, over chocolate cake with the Chinese president, he was talking about the first of 3 now aircraft carrier strike groups that are now surrounding North Korean peninsula. And how this is a lot of the subplot of that story is Trump's struggle with being his own man versus the deep state that wants to make him be their poodle, basically. With Hillary Clinton, she was a very eager and their first choice to be their puppet in the White House. Trump was not in the plan. And given that I wrote a book called President Trump, Trump for President, Astrological Predictions over a year before he was elected, I looked at his astrology when everybody in the summer of 2015 thought he was a clown. And I said, no, this man's got the destiny chart. He is, if he can survive all the Republicans and take them down, 17 he's competing with. And if he can get to the 8th of November, 2016, Election Day, I have never seen, in all the times I've done popular vote elections or presidential predictions since 1968, I have not seen anyone with better astrology to win an upset victory. So I wrote that, and it did happen. It was an odd year because usually since 68, I've been making presidential predictions by the popular vote. I'm still 13-0, even though Hillary Clinton didn't win, and also was correct about Trump being the upset.
So I'm having some opportunities with my internet. It seems like when I do some really good interviews sometimes, I don't know what happens, but the internet gremlins come out. So I'm turning my video off. Please leave yours on, but it's the amount of bandwidth. So you predicted Trump becoming president.
Yes.
And, you know, it's interesting because certainly I was under the conclusion that absolutely it was a shoe-in for Hillary. And, you know, I think most people did as well. And you can see the media now, how they kind of paint this picture of him being a you know, this clown and stuff like that. But he certainly, I feel, had a rhyme to the reason of his madness. And what we see now is the media is just painting a picture of him being this horrible president. His statistics are terrible, supposedly. But where do they get these statistics? I mean, they're probably having a big influence on the numbers as well, I would assume, because 6 corporations control 90% of the media. So do you see it getting real hairy, like in the Korean Peninsula? Did you see that as well in the stars? What's going on with that?
Well, in my John Hogue's Worldwide Astrological Predictions, which looks at the stars day by day, all the way through May of next year, and the amazing convergence of portentous astrology that's happening this very moment in August relates powerfully to Trump's natal chart. It has the conjunction or the magnification of energies right over his ascendant, this eclipse on the 21st of August in Leo, that takes his Leo rising, the way he is viewed by the world and the way the press views him, the way he expresses himself in the world, is going to be tremendously impacted. So the possibilities are many. I've often said, even in that first Trump book, that he could at any moment, with his Uranus that is right on his sun at birth, he could at any moment do, I call him Mr. Surprise, Surprise, Surprise. It's kind of Gomer piling his way through the presidency, because he will never be predictable. That is consistent about him. And it's very possible he could do a 180 as he did by striking Syria. He could do a 180 and just say, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving, and resign. That's one possibility. It's highly likely. The other is that the things that are about to hit this country, you mentioned a couple of the seismic areas. The other two, after Yellowstone and the Pacific Northwest, because of the subduction zone, is the New Madrid fault line in the Mississippi Basin. That area is populated by millions of people. St. Louis, Memphis, large-scale cities, major transport routes and hubs for connecting the entire country. It is completely unprepared for a quake. And if we had a resumption of what happened at the end of 1811 into 1812, 7.5 to 8.3 magnitude earthquakes in a intraplate zone, which means it's an old crust of the earth. So it resonates over a wide ranging area. In 1812, the Boston church bells were ringing automatically just from the shaking of that. It was actually shaking the bells in Boston. Similarly, down in South Carolina, that's where the eclipse leaves. That's the only active seismic zone on the eastern seaboard. It, in 1886, had a quake of about 7.8, I believe. And it hit and impacted devastated areas from a 60-mile radius around Charleston. It was also felt all the way into Cuba. So it's a similar intraplate situation. So now we're looking at a country that is far more populated, far more built up, with far more brick and mortar possibilities. I mean, even back in 1811, when the first shake hit St. Louis, it was on the edge of the epicenter. It knocked down a lot of the houses even then. So we're looking at these, if any one of these, shortly, just to give you an overview of this theory I have. I've been studying it for years, and finally I felt to publish my findings. I have noticed that whenever an eclipse is 90 degrees total to 100% total shadow, that there is a sequence that happens either a week after the eclipse has passed, or a few weeks up to 3 months. You might have 1 to 3 major seismic events upon the line, if there's seismic active zones, upon the line that the eclipse shadow passed over at 90 to 100%. Then there's a pause. And then 8 to 18 months later, another wave of quakes will start hitting the line in different places again. And then they will be less frequent, But some of the most powerful quakes can happen 2 years, 3 years to 5 years after the initial eclipse moment. So in the book, the two main eclipses that I use as examples, two great eclipses, were one was one that Nostradamus, the 16th century French prophet, actually described in his prophecies, which did happen. The places overshadowed by it were in the 11th August 1999 great eclipse. That's the one that came through England, down through Flanders Field in Belgium and northern France, which he described, went all the way across Eastern Europe, crossed over Greece, over Turkey and the Marmara Sea, and then went all the way through the midriff of Iran and went out Gujarat, India. What had happened is that just 6 days after that eclipse passed its totality over the Marmara Sea, there was a major quake, the Ismic quake, that killed as many as 49,000 people, knocked down hundreds of thousands of structures, caused a tsunami in the small little inner sea of Marmara that actually part of the northeastern coastline actually sank 6 feet. You know, a lot of the city's ocean fronts looked like they were part of a ruined Venice because the streets went underwater 6 feet after the tsunami. A little later, a few months later, another major town was hit, also saw the eclipse, and then it jumped over into Kutch, Gujarat, where the shadow passed over that and went over India and went into the Bay of Bengal. Kutch, unofficial death toll is 100,000. I happened to be going to India at that time, a few days after the quake, and flew over Kutch, the Rand of Kutch in Gujarat. And it was so eerie. We've all heard of the black hole of Calcutta. Well, the black hole in the power grid from one horizon to the other was this area that was completely knocked down, which in video feeds showed literally it looked like a rock. The towns were like rock quarries with trees, lines of trees in them to indicate where the roads used to be. It was completely devastating. And so there were all these quakes, and then several years later, one of the places, ironically, Bam, got bammed. 97,000 people in that city, a favorite tourist spot for Iranians, with an ancient ruined city. It used to be on the Silk Road trade routes, and it's an interesting desert city in Iran. It was literally leveled to the ground, with as many as 45,000 of those 97,000 people becoming casualties. So that happened with this quake. Then 10 years later, in 2009, there was the great eclipse of 2009, which intriguingly started with the shadow almost beginning where the Rand of Kutch happened. That's where the shadow started touching the earth. It was the greatest eclipse in history when you consider that it had one of the longest totalities, upwards of 6 minutes, because the moon was kind of in a supermoon format, which is always a more volatile time for quakes when the moon is a little closer than usual. It came from Kutch, again, went over the Ganges Plain, one of the most populated places in the world, went over Bhutan and Sikkim, the Himalayas, the eastern Himalayas, into the seismically active zone of Sichuan and the mountain areas, Yunnan and other areas, and the Tibetan autonomous regions. Then passed over the Han Plain, the other most populated zone on the planet, passed right over Shanghai, and then gave a totality to Honshu Island of 60 to 70%, the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, 100%, went all the way and launched off Earth, the shadow, just northeast of the Samoa and American Samoa. Within a little over a month after that happened, tsunamis erupted around Samoa, sending waves that were 35 feet to over 118 feet into the Samoa Ulupi Island. I don't remember the name of the island, but the main Samoa island, and Tonga was also hit with large tsunamis. the area in eastern China, where this mountainous Himalayan region, had a very intriguing thing happen. It was an area that always has a lot of 4 and 5 magnitude quakes, but only, except for one exception, all 5 of these quakes that were significant, 6 or above to 7, 7.5, and 8, were only in the area that was between 90% to 100% dark from the moon's shadow. So even in a high seismic zone, the majority of the quakes only hit where it was touched by the shadow. So again, we had another similar string of quakes happening, and now we're coming to this situation, which is almost like a continuation of this around the world on an eclipse shadow. When I studied Nostradamus, and he talked a lot about a great eclipse being the marker for a lot of the upheavals that are coming for the world, economic reversals and downfalls of nations that expand the theme from natural disasters, or perhaps triggered by natural disasters, to economic and military disasters, and essentially a world where something's got to give. A lot of stuck is going on in our politics, in our economy, our fiat system, all of that. And it may, sometimes when great changes happen in history, it's something like a natural disaster that can trigger the domino effect of a lot of structures made by man, made by man's mind, as well as physical natural structures start moving.
I think that it's fascinating to think about the possibilities of what could happen with the Madrid fault line, with all the nuclear reactors. Now, why is it then, do you think, that the eclipse is it the eclipse that's causing this? Is it because of where the moon's at specifically that's causing the tides to do what it does? Or is that how you break this down?
I have often found in my study of astrology, I can certainly appreciate astronomers who, like when Comet Elenin came in several years ago, and it seemed like every time it lined up, this little ice ball comet of no hardly massive significance, but every time it lined up with the Earth and the sun on its approach into the solar system, major quakes happened, tsunamis happened. The Tohoku tsunami in Japan happened around one of them. The other was the February 2013 tsunamis in Chile. The Christchurch, the second great Christchurch quake in South Island, New Zealand, all hit on or a few days in, on or around, just like quakes often happen with full or new moons, or first or last quarter moons, which is a 90-degree square of the sun, Earth. It's a T-square basically between the sun, Earth, and the moon. That this happens, and you will find, I have in the book a whole list of the 13 greatest, most deadliest quakes of the last 2 centuries, and it is shocking to see how many major quakes happen on a full moon, a new moon, or a squared moon, either a day or two before, mostly on, or a day or two after, as it's waning, the influence is happening, waxing before. And so Elenin was coming in and showing this, and astronomers were saying, oh, there's all these people thinking it's some astrological thing, but that gravity doesn't work that way. And of course, they can't really say that because we only can read what the effect of gravity. And there's also the possibility that there's electromagnetic, some kind of other forces in gravity that we have not yet discovered because our instruments have not advanced. Because what happened is that comet came around the sun, and then it broke up from the sun's gravitational pull. And it was scheduled to have 2 more lineups. They didn't happen. It was gone. So there's also, where I start the book off, is stuff that I learned in India about superstition that people have in India. Some people, not all, certainly multitudes come out and see eclipses, but other people will actually go into temples to pray. They will lock up their doors and shut their houses when the shadow passes over, and they will keep pregnant women away from the shadow, because they believe from ancient Vedic stories and tales that there's some kind of force, cosmic force, that is released during eclipses that does something to people, can make them crazy, and also does something to the earth. And it is, a lot of that could just be atavistic fears of people who don't understand a powerful natural cosmic phenomenon. I mean, the chill they feel coming over their souls may just be the fact that the shadow, when it becomes suddenly night, has chilled the temperature 10, 20 degrees, and it's just the weather impact. But I have come, in the study of unusual things, I have come to understand that every superstition has some credibility, some kernel of truth in it. And so I started studying this situation of well, is there something actually active in quakes? And there is. Coming back to another subject of what this could do to America, the other theory I looked at is it's possible that even though Atlantis might be a myth, what isn't a myth is that America, for some whatever reason, is very similar in the tale of Atlantis as this antediluvian empire on an island in the Atlantic, what the Atlantic is named after, which kind of points to something being true about it. And the fact that it may be a myth, but why is it that all the people on the northern Atlantic rim of nations all have similar names for Atlantis, whether they're Mesoamericans or Basque in Spain or Irish? The Basques call it Atlantica. The Aztecs and Mayas called it Atitlan. The Irish call it Avalon, and so forth. There's a similar thing going on in the same tales, that there was this nation out there that died in one night, and they were very proud, advanced, kind of global policemen. Preached one thing, did another. Hypocrites, very dangerous hypocrites, and when they related to the world, and then they were taken down either by some divine force or some coincidence. Natural disasters took the proud Atlanteans down. And I'm seeing this eclipse not as a sinking of America like Atlantis. I always say, and I caution in the book, one of the best ways to read prophecy is to understand how I call it prophetic hyperbole. A lot of people, the seers, exaggerate their visions because they're emotionally impacted by them. So I always hose them down a bit and say, okay, that's not like Nostradamus describing this great eclipse was saying they will see that the motion of the world has been upset, and it will throw it into darkness. Now, is he expanding upon a vision of seeing a great earthquake, meaning because it's so powerful that it's taking the whole world down? Is it because he grew up listening to the book of Revelation in church, in Catholic Church, when he was after he was born in 1503, and had imprinted upon him a filter of how you look at the future that was very much like St. John's book of Revelation about the great earthquake where every island was moved out of its place and mountains collapsed and etc. And the people were trying to hide in the caves, bury us from the Lamb, and so we can survive his judgment. It's paraphrasing. And so also with prophets, you have to kind of take that in, that they're going to see things according to what they understand, what they're told, what their mindset filters have been set on, in his case in the 1500s. And that's a very important thing to have, an empathy for that. So then you can kind of read through their own filters and see something else. So with all that said, I'm thinking that we could certainly see this American hegemon knocked to its knees by a series in the next 5 years after the eclipse, a series of natural disasters, compounded upon by things that are happening with the climate already. And Trump's chart shows that it's a life-changing experience, just like on clockwork. When I was writing my John Hogue's worldwide astrological predictions, like clockwork, when Saturn and Mars started to return to fire signs, influencing Trump's chart, about the third week of July, is when all these, like, we're taking power away from you moments started happening, where the Congress is brazenly doing something unconstitutional unanimously. It's the only unanimous vote that the Congress has given during the Trump era, where Republicans and Democrats, almost to a man and woman, voted in favor of basically taking the office of the presidency, their power to negotiate and lift sanctions or put on sanctions, away without their approval. And I see that as a message. This is the second time. The Trump strike Syria was a message where Trump was trying to do the bidding of the deep state. And that was the first time that even CNN commentators said, well, this was, launching the 57 missiles. That's when Trump became a president. It's like you've got to kill somebody to become a president. People got to understand that a lot of people who vote Democrat, they say, well, we always vote for the lesser of two evils. And I say, well, look at the math. The corporations, the new face of fascism in our era, corporate fascism, which is a multinational experience, which has taken over this nation since Citizens United allowed free speech become money. And of course, the people with the most free speech will be the people with the most money, who can buy off Democrats and Republicans. The situation has happened that if you look at the last presidential cycles, where has the money gone, the majority of it? It hasn't gone to the Republicans. It's gone to Barack Obama twice, Hillary Clinton a third time. If you want to look at lesser of two evils, the Democratic Party, the machine, the corporate Democratic Party is really the A team right now. It was, because it shifts from Republicans to Democrats, A team, B team. The same people who wanted the things that Hillary Clinton would have done easily, like undermine relationships with Russia, deepen the new Cold War that we're in. Keep the war market thriving in the Middle East, increase it with China, get tough on North Korea. All this stuff was kind of planned for Hillary, and it's kind of pushing Trump into doing it. And it's a statement, because again, look at the pattern of it. He meets Donald Trump at the G20. Vladimir Putin does. They get along famously, as I saw in their charts, composite charts, that they get each other, which is fortunate for the world. When the two nuclear leaders, the two greatest nuclear powers, if they have a problem, they get each other. Even they know when the guy's bluffing. They know, and that is good for us, because one of the other things that my books have studied is this experience in Nostradamus about a long and short countdown that happens when two great eagle kings, the great brothers of the north, the great powers of Aquila, the Aquilons, which are the eagle kings after Aquila, the eagle constellation in the north, when they have totems that are eagles, both, then there's a danger that in my book, A New Cold War, the prophecies of Nostradamus, Stormberger, and Edgar Casey, which I suddenly had to write like Trump strikes Syria, unplanned, in April of 2014, because after 30 years of studying Nostradamus, I've been watching like a hawk when something would happen that would trigger these timelines, because Nostradamus makes timelines all the time. It's quite remarkable. His timelines are very accurate. The challenge is he never gives you when to start counting. You have to be watchful and see when the count is begun. And after all those decades, that's the only time that I really felt, wow, it started, was when the Ukrainian Maidan revolution, which was peacefully resolved, was suddenly overthrown by neo-fascist elements in the Ukrainian movement that threw out the Yanukovych government and freaked out Russia and all the Russians in Crimea, which had been, until this snafu at the end of the Cold War, Crimea had been for 300 years a Russian province populated by Russians, that suddenly finds itself in Ukraine. Because Khrushchev changed the borders during the Soviet Union, never expecting the Soviet Union would collapse. But it should have been taken back. I always thought, even back in the early 90s, that was grounds for World War III someday in the future. And I even wrote about it. The Russians took back Crimea because of the threats that you didn't hear in the Western press, the threats of ethnic cleansing, of the Novi Russians in Lugansk and Donetsk and Crimea. The Ukrainian army with militias and with Blackwater Academy militias by 600 or 700 men were going to attack and ethnically cleanse those areas. So of course they stood up to rebel it. The Russians let some of their soldiers come in on furlough to help if they wanted to drag their tank over. Yes. And that was Putin saying, you can't win a military situation. Let's talk. Let's see if we can sort this out peacefully. But that doesn't work for the military-industrial complex need to create a new Cold War. What's scary about this, I come to it quickly now, is that in this book, I put together all these amazingly accurate prophets, along with Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce and Stormberger, who clearly dated, described World War I and II, sometimes hundreds of years before it happened. These same prophets, except for one, are absolutely adamant that there will be a third world war that comes because people don't even believe it's possible. It'll come when Russia has two-headed white eagle and America has the bald eagle as their totems. It will come, and when it comes when a new Cold War starts that nobody's calling a Cold War, and the presidents even. It comes when Stormberger says, with open eyes shall the people of the earth walk into these catastrophes. It comes as an accident. It comes as there are links in Nostradamus which shows that it comes from a certain Arab leader, a vassal of either the Russians or the Americans in Syria and Iraq, called Babare. Babare is an anagram for Barbary, for the Barbary Corsairs, which was his metaphor from the 16th century to say they're terrorists, because he uses the terrorists, Islamic terrorists of his time, who used to rob and hijack ships and raid the coast of France. So he uses that to apply to future Islamic terrorists. So it's a terrorist who is a vassal, a friend. We know that we have sometimes financed and certainly looked the other way when one of Nostradamus's new and formidable new candidate for his third and final Antichrist, which we'll talk about in a moment, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. We look the other way when they have been financing and training and sending troops to be part of ISIS. And of course, Al-Qaeda is also one of their contributed creations. So our vassals are actually creating our Babare, which is an anagram in French for Darab.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Because so you're saying that the current, is this a current prince right now in Saudi Arabia?
Yes, very quickly, Nostradamus is the only prophet in history who saw 3 antichrists. The first was Napoleon Noir from Paul Ney Laurent, which is the anagram. Napoleon Noir is Napoleon King. The second is Hister, from the ancient name of the river Danube. That is where Hitler grew up, and Hister is Hitler. There are 5 prophecies about him, and it all sounds like World War II, even dates it. The third Antichrist is Mabus, M-A-B-U-S. He's different from the others. It's his death, it's his martyrdom, it's his annihilation at the onset of his war that creates either 25 years or 27 years of the war of the third Antichrist. Now, what's unclear about this is one might be a warm-up to the other, because the candidates that I initially looked at in my book, Nostradamus and the Antichrist, codenamed Mabus, were there are 2 American presidents and several Arab leaders who see their name easily decoded into M-A-B-U-S. George W. Bush, Barack Obama were the 2 presidents. And they had a relationship with fighting in the Middle East, true, the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, all of that with them. Then you have certain rules, like if you use the occult anagrammic law of reverse lettering, which Nostradamus used, you get Mabus out of actually reversing it in a mirror-like way, and then reversing anything like D's to B's, anything that can be mixed, swiveled, because they used to do that with typeface in the 16th century. You get basically Saddam. It actually spells out phonetic to Arabic for the one who confronts. Very odd name to give a child. There's a whole story behind that. Saddam's mother, when she was a widow with a pregnancy, she tried to ram her baby bump into a wall several times so she could cause a miscarriage, but it didn't work, even though she knocked herself out literally doing it. And then so she gave him the name, the one who confronts, Saddam. Nobody's named Saddam in Arabic. And so he's one. The other is you take Mabus and you look at Osama bin Laden. Usama, that's the correct, not Osama, like we don't call ourselves Americans. Usama is U-S-A-M-A. That's M, two A's, U-S. One redundant letter can be replaced by a missing letter in the puzzle. You get Mabus. He is also a major candidate. Both Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden both have in his holy war before his death, Osama bin Laden, and in Saddam's presidency until his hanging, were in perpetual war, and both lasted 27 years. 27 years his war will last, says Nostradamus. But it seems like the martyrdom of these people creates another quarter century of conflict. That's how I finally interpreted it after so many years. So now, those are some of the others. Now we had the most recent, the Caliph of the pirate Islamic State, Baghdadi. He uses the word Abu for father as his code name. And he has other names, many other names, which all translate into the code of Mabus. Abu is one of the easiest ones, so I'll use it here. It's the anagram game where you take the first and last letter off a word and just let it hang there. And then you have to guess what those missing letters are. So Abu is M, A-B-U-S. And so he's dead. The Russians did get him with a missile, and dozens of his generals and hundreds of his bodyguards in the opening stages of the Battle of Raqqa in May. So he is down. So now that means it's not over. It means the martyrdom has been complete. Now we have to see if 25 years of war comes after that. The thing that has emerged, though, is that whenever a void is there, new candidates come up. And I would now say, and I would say that the crown prince who's risen out of nowhere, his classic way, Napoleon rose out of nowhere, Hitler rose out of nowhere. This prince has been favored by King Solomon of Saudi Arabia, one of his sons. And he's suddenly come from being a deputy crown prince to crowding out the heir apparent, and now becoming the crown prince, just like that, boom, boom, boom. And now, because his father is ailing with strokes, it's very likely. In fact, he's responsible for most of the outrages that are going on, the Qatari situation, the absolute destruction and eugenic war that the press hardly talks about that's going on in Yemen, that's about to starve and destroy the whole country, just because Houthis are fighting with Sunnis. It's Shia on Sunni. It's the Islamic civil war. You know, it's an interesting point that religions have lifetimes as well and cycles of life. Islam is younger than Christianity, and it's actually exactly the same place that Christianity was in the times of Nostradamus through the 1500s into the 1600s, when it went through its season of religious civil wars and religious region-wide wars against Protestants and Catholics. The Shia, the minority sect of the Muslim world, and the Sunni majority sect are now pitting themselves. If you look deeper than what's going on in Syria and all, this is the great 30 years war of Islam like similar to what happened at the same point when we were as old as Islam, Christianity, in the late 1500s into the 1600s. So this is what's ongoing, and Saudi Arabia is a key financer to the fighting and trying the attempt to eradicate the Shia, which is the majority country of Shia. The only one that has that's big and powerful is Iran. And so they're fighting, just like in the 30 Years' War, regional powers are fighting for hegemony using the excuse of killing millions of people in a religious civil war and devastating wide tracts of the area, just like in the 30 Years' War, where half of Middle Europe's population was eradicated by 30 years of conflict. Mostly was destroying cities, just like we're doing now in the Middle East. So bin Salman, Mohammed bin Salman is now becoming, perhaps after 25, 30 years of this, is becoming perhaps the most formidable candidate for the Antichrist of Nostradamus, and his also Muhammad also translates into Mavis. So we have to watch him, and because he's not just some renegade terrorist. He's a terrorist with all the power of one of the wealthiest countries in the world. He is the main pusher, or the main, you could say he's the main pusher for the addiction America has with their military industrial complex, and feeding them billions and billions of dollars of weapons. So it's that's the real dangerous man to look out for now.
You know, it seems to me like it's somewhat of a consciousness. Like if you say you're the Antichrist, it's like a label of more than just a person. Like maybe it's a certain entity behind the scenes. Like, do you feel that, do you believe in spiritual side of things as well? Do you believe in reincarnation maybe, or what's your take on this physical body?
My main path, I've been a disciple of Osho since 1980. I'm actually in the order of Swami from India. So my sannyas name, my Sanskrit name is Swami Dhyan Arjuna. My path is meditation. This is my day job, looking at prophecy, and my open secret is one of the reasons why I'm accurate is that I apply the science of self-observation to understand how predictability, which is often a factor in the ego of people being under the illusion of their false personas that society gives them, makes them very predictable. Intelligence is always spontaneous, but mediocrity is very mechanical. And if one tunes into that in one's own body-mind conditioning, become a conscious witness of that, one then easily, as you go deep, you see the compassionate connection with everyone else. You can see how all of us are under our different modes of, I don't call it brainwashing. In fact, I'm all for brainwashing. I want a clean brain every moment. I call what's happening in the world brain dirtying, brain schmutzing, to use a Yiddish word.
Brain chat.
Yeah, there you go. Where our heads are being filled with crap every moment, and they need to be washed with self-observation. So yes, I have books about reincarnation that are coming up, where I actually looked and documented some past lives that I saw and visioned that I'd had, and didn't know anything about the situation, but they were a well-known enough historical figure, a minor general in Napoleon's army, that I was able to actually find the painting, and because I knew it would look like me, only with curly hair and a wax mustache, a thin jaw like I have now, with big mutton chop sideburns, a clean chin, but something that was really not what people did in the 1812 time. It was a little tuft of hair under his lip. That was a fad that came in the 1850s with French generals and French people. So I thought, well, that's why I can prove this wrong, because nobody did that in Napoleon's army. It had a little tough beard underneath. Well, I finally, after 10 years, found his portrait, and he had my same stocky body. He had the mutton chop sideburns, a tuft. It was and on top of that, there were many other things I go through in the book where I said, well, he's got a green uniform. That's not French. The French are all blue uniforms. And then I studied later and found out that he started as a chevau léger, line cavalryman. They were the only regiments in the French cavalry in Napoleon's time wore green. So they were chasseurs. And so I was going, oh, that's interesting. That's also interesting. So there was one general I felt very attached to. And I found out that this man that was his father-in-law. And he married that General Moran's daughter. So things like that started tying together. And in my studies in East, where the people are much more open to documenting reincarnation experiences, deal with that. So yeah, so to your question, I end the Nostradamus and the Antichrist codename Mabus book with kind of a surprising, because it came out of the blue. I exhaustively looking at all the different people that could be this man, like a detective, I call it a sleuthsayer. And I then said, but actually Nostradamus is barking up the wrong tree. I'm going to tell you about a deeper Antichrist that these people personify. But this Antichrist, I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to give you a face-to-face look at them. So put down your tablet, put down your book, and get up. Walk into your bathroom. Look into the mirror. That's not the Antichrist. It's the mind that's interpreting what you're seeing. That is the Antichrist. The Antichrist, Christ is consciousness. Antichrist then is unconsciousness. I call at the end of this book, I called it the chapter, the Antichrist Unconscious. It is the ultimate conspiracy. The root conspiracy of all conspiracies is that we are, by mere happenstance, it's not some plan. That comes later. People delude themselves into thinking there's order and plan to it. But what my experience of it is, through meditating since 1980, is and seeing my own Antichrist unconsciousness, is that it just happened. And then it made its own form, almost like dust created a planet. And suddenly it looks like it was all created, but it was just happenstance. And we don't know how it begins, but it has an end. And there's a beautiful statement about that Buddha said, unconsciousness, when did it start? And he said, it never had a beginning, but it has an end. And awareness has a beginning, consciousness and love, but there's no end to it. It's eternal. And so it's a simple situation of you have, so I say that the Antichrist in consciousness is that which makes us think that we are masters of our own soul, that our names, our thoughts, and our feelings are our own, when in fact our identifications are really borrowed from other people. And from childhood onward, we're trained not to see that's going on. We're trained to say, well, when you do that, then my button's pushed and I cry or I get angry or something like that. But if you go deeper into it, there is a moment where you can find out. You can hear the voice of the person who gave you that idea. Your mother's voice, your father's voice, your teacher's voice, your priest's voice. It'll come in the voice of the person that made you buy into that as being true. And the problem too is it's a very simple but profound problem. We come into this mystery of a life, of mortal life, a mystery visiting, and we use our body mind kind of like our vehicle on the path of our lives. Whether it goes into a ditch or goes all the way to the destination, it's dependent upon how we drive it around all the other vehicles on the road of time, all the other individuals or mysteries that find themselves for a time visiting this mortal universe in a vehicle. There's nothing wrong with identification. There's nothing wrong with using it as a tool. There's nothing wrong with the mind being a servant to consciousness. But when it's the master, it's a mess. It cannot be a master. That's just like saying at one point I'm the being driving my car, and suddenly I dupe myself into thinking that I am the car. If you do that, you go into a ditch. And that's why most of our history and the future echoing similar things, because we're fueling the Antichrist unconscious, is creating a very predictable problem where humanity keeps crawling out of ditches and falling into other ditches. And it's become more serious now because now we've reached a global stasis of this, and we need to truly evolve now, or we're going to see some very serious upheavals, which might knock us back several hundred years, or we can push through them and create a whole different humanity, which is also foreseen by the more rebellious prophets, the coming of Homo novus, the new man.
Let me jump in on that, and I think this is really important because I've read through many of the Sumerian tablets. I've read through the Greek mythos, the Egyptian mythos, the Hebrew scriptures and such, and I've been able to connect a lot of dots. And actually, I had a chance to meet Heidi Vandenberg from Channel 27, and that's how I had the opportunity to meet you as well. And she does this Vedic astrology where she's really detailed on these certain charts, and that's what kind of took me into the Eastern realm of things more. And I started doing more research and just fascinated with all the connections. So where am I going with this? Well, it seems to me like we can find a lot of information about what was going on in the Middle East a few thousand years ago. And it seems to me like these kings like to label themselves as gods, and they would connect themselves to planets and stars and stuff like that. And there's a lot of these tablets that talk about they would come from the heavens. And then even some of the Vedas, you see these flying vehicles and stuff like that. And then you get into the 6 different realms in Egyptian desires. You've got the God realm, the demigod realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the ghost realm, then the hell realm. The Anunnaki, do you think they existed? Do you think they exist? Did they manipulate us somewhat? Did they take us in our current form? What's your take on some of that ancient stuff in regards to our current situation now? Because it seems to me like even if you read Adam and Eve, let me add a little bit more to this. In Genesis, and when Adam was created, first he was created, and then the Gnostics talk about how Adam was created greater than they were. And they're like, uh-oh, we created this being that's greater than us. So what do? Well, let's put him in a meat suit. Let's create all these firewalls. Let's dumb him down so he doesn't, mess with us. And it seems to me like they're still kind of doing that to us with the GMOs and everything else and what they teach us and what they talk to us about. And then now we're going into this new singularity kind of moment where we're creating this new consciousness. And people like Ray Kurzweil are really the leading edge in that, which it could take us to the next level, but it could destroy us as well. It's kind of like what you talked about. What happened in the past seems to be happening right now. But with 450 nuclear reactors, if something really bad goes down, these things start popping like firecrackers. I mean, that could wipe out the entire planet, couldn't it? And so are we going through the same kind of cycles? Like, I know I put a lot in there. What's your take on some of the ancient stuff with the Anunnaki manipulating us? Do you believe in that kind of narrative, or do you think it's something different?
First off, I never believe in anything because belief is, if you look deeper into it, is qualified ignorance.
Okay.
I seek to know, and I embrace and accept the fact that I don't know a whole lot. But that keeps me open. I use the word skeptic in its true sense, not like some of these parlor magicians from Las Vegas who use it to be cynics. Skepticos has no qualification of prejudice for or against. It simply means in Greek, the original Greek, to investigate. It's just like the Indo-European word for doubt. It means to hover between two possibilities. It's not negative or positive. Meditation is not negative or positive. It simply looks without being for or against and then observes. And amazing miracles happen when you step out of being in the mix, but allow. And so about the Anunnaki, it goes back to what I said about superstitions. There's got to be a kernel of truth there. There's also the dogma of archaeology that's almost like a religious dogma that doesn't want to see civilization or the first forming of structures beyond 5000 BC. And yet here are grids of cities, which I talk about in the Great American Eclipse. There are grids of cities off the coast of Gujarat, which were accidentally discovered by sonar mapping, which clearly show 2 cities where there was a city at 340 some feet lower than the sea level today, and another one around 170 feet. These match the 2 times when the ocean rose more rapidly. It means these people had to move their city. The grid is there. There's also a similar thing on the other side of the South Indian tip of India that looks like a strange corral, it's carved out of a solid stone, and it's clearly carved, and it's underwater in places that had to have been, just like the city in Gujarat had to have been 10,000 BC. You have the Rig Veda in the Vedas that describes astrological positions of the stars that had to have existed 70,000 years ago, not any time sooner. So we have enough circumstantial evidence and some very tangible evidence to show that there's a lot more to the story of global society that could factor in the possibility of an Atlantis, or there's Ulipi, one of the wives of Arjuna, from the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, who is an exile, and the name, the way it's spelled, does not exist in Sanskrit, but it definitely exists in Mesoamerican, Mayan, and Aztec languages. So she could have been from, there's even people who say that she came from the land of Mexico. Why is there cocaine in mummies in Egypt? There was no cocaine made or grown, we thought, until people went to the Americas and rediscovered them. Why are there so many stories about the Western Hemisphere every once in a while creating some big, overblown, bullying power that's knocked down again and again by natural disasters, so to kind of balance the world out? Yes, I think eventually we'll find out that there is an extraterrestrial connection to our evolution. The signs are there. Mythology is just not made up. There are some stories. They could be changed, and things over time can be changed, but the core of the myth, and I've always felt that myth, in my the first full-bodied biography ever done on the life of Nostradamus, I created in 2003, called Nostradamus: A Life and Myth. And it was really also a study of myth in all its forms: the lowest, below truth, flim-flam, lies, deception, wives' tales, and above factual truth. A perennial experience. You can learn more about World War I and Tolkien's experiences in World War I from the heart by watching Frodo and Sam in Mordor, because Mordor was his mythological version of the Western Front, where he lost almost all of his friends but one, just like Sam and Frodo and Mordor. Myth, you can learn more about the real things that matter, not whether Columbus sailed the blue in 1492, but who was he? Why did he sail? Why do human beings constantly explore and risk? Why are they motivated? In case of Columbus, he was motivated to convert the West when he realized the Indians were there, and fulfill the biblical prophecy that only the apocalypse can happen. Another misused word, it means enlightenment in ancient Greek. Can happen when the whole world has heard the good news of Jesus Christ, and he became quite a crusader for that in his early explorations of America. The main thing is, we're always talking in history not about the details, but we should learn about the love, the hate, the jealousy, the heroic, the meditative. These are the real messages, and there is myth is higher. It is essential truth, not factual truth. So yes, there's something going on in we know so little about our past, and we need to use scientific discipline to question all those things. Certain scientists were not having a problem thinking out of the box, like Einstein at Pisces. That's very Pisces of him. It is time for science. Even in science, just like in religion, you have the exoteric people in religion. They build the religions, but they'll get to a point where they'll even kill and crucify the esoteric living teaching of their own religion. Those who have not built the church for Jesus, but became Christ's in their own right. They're the people, I mean, if you even say that in Christianity, they say you cannot be Christ according to our religion. There's only one Christ. But consciousness is consciousness. I think the whole point was for everybody to become Christ, not Christians. Everybody was to become a Buddha, an awakened one, not a mere Buddhist. So the religions are exoteric. They tend to build the structures and politicize and make business out of the living truth, which they eventually expel from the religion. And in the same way, I lost my thread about where I was going. But
well, you were talking about how religions kind of manipulate the truth for like the money funders. I think it's kind of where you're going with that. It turns it into earthly things, what's important. And that was great. That was.
I'm just simply saying that myth is about essential truth. I was going to take it to some other comparison to politics and other things, but I guess it just dropped out there. When I talk, I don't think. I just simply, I tune into you, I tune into your audience, and then things happen. And I mean, I may have done a lot of study and prepared myself and written a lot of books, but I actually come from a space, even when I do my own predicting, of emptiness, just waiting, effortless. And then there it is. The greatest truth comes to us effortlessly because we're always in the way of it. It's always there. It's not coming to us. We're under the illusion of going to it. And it's an old habit. It takes a long time sometimes to see. I'm still sometimes being caught in it. But as I go deeper into this situation, into this mystery as a meditator, I become aware of I know a whole lot less than I thought I did when I began. And with everything that I knew dropping away, I become more intimate with the mystery that I cannot describe in words. I can only be it, live it, exude it, and there's no knowing.
That's awesome. And it seems to me like what you just said, when you just flow and you don't have to think about it, it just comes to you. That's when the most inspirational things come out, I feel. And I that's absolutely beautiful. And, in closing out tonight, I wish I could talk to you for 8 hours because you've got so much knowledge. Hopefully we can have you back on the show sometime.
I'll be back.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That would be a real honor. Give us a couple of gems in closing out and let us know how we can get access. I know we can go to Amazon and get your books, but is it better to go to your website, or what would you recommend if we wanted to start reading some of your material?
Well, a couple of things. I've just set up at my website a new series of articles which will introduce what I consider it's the 3 books that I've written so far in this year, and I consider them must-read books. So you can go there, see a little overview if you see the covers and stuff, and if you harmonize with it, if you have a yes for buying them, they're on Amazon. You can get them very quickly with one-click shopping as ebooks. Eventually, all these books will be printed, so that's also a possibility. I usually take all my books for 3 months into Amazon, and then after the 3-month Prime time for it, I then open them up to be on all other Kobo, Nook, iTunes, all the other stuff using drafted digital formats. So that's the other thing. The other thing is that just type in my name, John Hogue, Hogue, like the wine, or Hogue with the UE on it. And if you type that into books by John Hogue at Amazon, you'll get a whole list of my books. And then you can look at them and resonate with which ones intrigue you. I highly recommend the one that just came out because it talks a lot about how to prepare and what could happen potentially if seismic activity does happen. That's The Great American Eclipse, Earthquake and Tsunami is the book. It's a short book. I put it together in 2 weeks. It's about 26,000 words with a lot of extras for other little sample chapters from other books included. And it has won, actually, even though this is really scary stuff, I mean, I live in an island in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, I'm in one of the probably biggest
I used
areas.
to live on an island in the Northwest. Which island do you live on out
I
there?
live on Whidbey.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Nice. It was a
Yeah.
smaller island. It was a smaller island that I was on out there in between Olympia and Tacoma. And it's just a tiny little island. But yeah, Whidbey Island. That's great, man.
Was it Vashon? Were you on Vashon?
No, it wasn't Vashon. I don't want to say what island
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
because it's so small, but it was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was a
Yeah.
small one.
Yeah,
Sounds
so I live, and I made a point of living 100 feet above the ocean that I can walk down to, because if the waves come in, it'll be a lot like Banda Aceh. It could be the unzipping. In fact, the Suma subduction zone is very similar in shape to the San Juan de Fuca plate, marine plate going under the American plate, across the coastline of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And if it were to unzip in a 9-point earthquake, like it did in 1700, actually they know the exact day. It was in late January of 1700 because of records in Japan, because the people were completely caught off guard. There was no quaking, of course, in Japan, but waves that were even larger than what happened in 2011 started assaulting the Honshu coast, just the same area, and killed 50,000 Japanese in 1700. Because they didn't have a warning, they couldn't get up the high ground. Suddenly the waves were there. So the quake that hit in 1700 was massive megathrust. It was probably at least as powerful as 9.3, maybe even 9.6. Hopefully that's not going to happen. Some of the predictions are saying 8.5 would be the worst case scenario. But if it unzips, a wave that can be over, in some places, 100 feet to around the average of 35 to 40 feet could hit all the coastline there, killing as many as 12,000 people, because we're so unprepared for this. And this book is also about being prepared. Get your food, get your water, be prepared for 7 days of any situation. Know your escape routes. Just if the state is not going to teach you how to drill for these things, do it with your own family, or with your neighbors and friends. Get together and say, okay, well, if it happens, we have about 35 minutes to get to higher ground, and just watch how the Japanese handled Tohoku. You know, their walls around their sea walls were good. What happened in the quake is it was so massive that it dropped the northeast Honshu coast by 6 to 7 feet. So suddenly those perfectly built tsunami walls were lost 7 feet. The sea didn't. And that's why it spilled over all those walls. They'd lost 7 feet in just a 5-minute quake. So this is, we don't even have seawalls in the Pacific Northwest. So the book goes into detail about what could happen. It goes into detail.
I hope you have a boat, John. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope you have a boat.
Well, no. If I did, I'd head it towards the tidal wave. So that's the way to do it. But the thing is that there's a lot of potential surprising good that could happen from this. For instance, America is in desperate need of a shock, a Pearl Harbor moment that will get this country kind of out of this funk that we're in, this polarization, this red state, blue state stuff, the Congress, which can't vote for anything unless they want to stop peace from happening in the world and prevent the president from doing his job, whether you like him or not. That is not good for the United States. And I hope that something will go on and be petitioned to the Supreme Court to overrule those sanctions. That is unconstitutional. That is the deep state saying, it's a deep state saying all the people we paid off and who erroneously call themselves Republicans or Democrats, the people that we finance to be there, not you American people. Our free speech gets these people there, pays their bills, gets their expensive campaigns going. They got the message. Sit on that Trump guy. He's going to stop the military-industrial complex. He's going to stop our war business. And I mean, what would happen if peace happened? No Cold War. What would happen if the ISIS was really destroyed and they restored peace in the Middle East? Well, there goes another big war market. What What if we could make peace with Iran? There goes another war market. These people don't know peace is against their business. So Trump, the only other president that questioned the power of the deep security state was John F. Kennedy, who wanted to break up the CIA after the Bay of Pigs. And with Khrushchev, the two men who almost pushed the button of World War III, both those men started to do things to take down both their military industrial complexes in America and the Soviet Union. What happened? Kennedy was assassinated. Khrushchev was overthrown and sent the rest of his life to house arrest. And the military industrial complexes kept their Cold War going on for decades from both sides because it was good for Russian business as well as American business. And one other final thing that's important. Edgar Cayce was the only one of those World War III prophets who did not see a third world war, but instead gave us a solution and gave us the key to what would avoid it. He talked about from 1934 to 1944 in his trance readings, he talked about on occasion that Russia, once it became free of Bolshevism and communism, would become the hope of the world. That for some reason, because of its unique positioning straddling Asia and Europe, that Russia, the future Russia, would actually be a country in the mission of peaceful resolutions of things. One of the most oddball things I've seen in my lifetime of doing this work is how completely, as Nostradamus predicted, the West would lose its mind fixated on planning a war with the East. And by accident triggering it. What's going on? This demonization of the Russians, these hacks that do not exist, the intelligence reports that actually show it was a copied leak job inside the DNC server. The fact that Wasserman Schultz has a person who's highly possibly the person who knew all the passwords of everybody, who's in legal trouble, but she kept him on when everybody else left him off. He might have been the leaker to WikiLeaks. The man who was shot in the back in a so-called robbery in New York after being at the Democratic convention, that other man who Assange even hinted was the source. There is no Russian hack. In fact, Veritas did a great service by catching CNN producers in the act of basically saying it's all bullshit. And we're just doing it for ratings. This is just the kind of madness that creates a climate of delusion that creates an accident that creates a war that Nostradamus describes very clearly, destroys 2/3 of the human race suddenly. And we have people now, especially in the press, who have lost their sense of reason to understand how dangerous it is to make accusations which are grounds for war between two chief nuclear arms powers in the world with enough nuclear power to destroy the civilization, create a nuclear winter, and starve whoever survived out. The end of all of us. And these idiots on CNN and other places are fomenting, obsessing, and not even giving this president a chance, which is, I think, very un-American, and I didn't vote for him. And very dangerous, that because actually the demonization of Putin is probably, I would say, history will show that he's, of this period, one of the most rational and best leaders we have out there, who in every step has tried to negotiate peace in Ukraine, in Middle East, and we're the people who reward that he helped the agreement with the Iranians too. Every time he does something to create more peace in the world, we throw more sanctions on him, because peace is not what this country wants. Its government is fascist, it has become corporately fascist, and war is good business. This is so Atlantean that these natural disasters may shock us out of that grip, and it may even transform our president into a leader like a Franklin Delano or Roosevelt. And all this bickering about what infrastructure and jobs we need to do. Well, when St. Louis is leveled and Memphis and a lot of the infrastructure of the basin, when devastation has hit the Northwest and Charleston, it'll be a national emergency, which will also create the jobs to rebuild it all. So infrastructure might come from the shock of these natural disasters. The fiat economy, which will collapse between now and 2021, may be shocked, so that we have to look at other alternative economic ways of restoring gold standard, or a multifaceted new version of that. I'm all in favor of shocks. The positive side of it, I don't like being shocked, but I've seen enough shocks in my life which has given me attention to an illusion and freed me from that, the Antichrist unconscious.
Certainly, there is a lot to look forward to. We live in an opportunity now where it can be like a new Renaissance, or it can be Hellraiser meets Twilight Zone. You know, I mean, you said all of those things, and really, I mean, like this painting behind me, it's Donald Trump, the Twilight Zone. We live in the Twilight Zone. Who would have thought Donald Trump would become president? And hey, I wish him the very best. And certainly, I'm a lot happier that he's in the position right now that Hillary was supposed to have a shoe-in for. Who knows what would be going on right now? But hey, I'm just saying, I had a nightmare about her one time where she was like questioning me in my dream. Hey, what do you think of me? How I'm like, whoa, it was a bizarre dream, man. But I'll tell you, John, so do you think that really we need to stay away from the coast? I mean, that would be your recommendation. Those certain hot spots might be pretty gnarly coming up here in just the next couple of weeks even.
Well, I'm not about escaping anything. Nice. I live in this beautiful area because in the Pacific Northwest, because I understand the natural forces that from time to time come and shape it, which could destroy my house and destroy my body, are part of what it is to live on a dynamic planet. So my way of looking at it is I'm not going anywhere. I certainly live 100 feet above sea level on my island. I'm preparing for it. And then there will be the opportunities that the shock will create. There'll be some difficult times, but there's also opportunity. It's all what one's attitude is about these things. And it's so hard with our conditioning. I mean, meditation has taught me to look beyond good and evil, but something higher, something deeper, that everything that happens in our life is an opportunity. And of course, this is an opportunity for all the people on the coast of the Pacific Northwest to take tsunami preparation seriously, which they're not doing. Sadly, if 12,000 people drowned, that won't ever happen again. That's the good side. We don't have to be drones and so predictable and see those 12,000 people killed. But such is the case, as Buddha used to say, suchness. A meditator learns that such is the case, that people are the way they are. You can go, I wish they weren't. You can go, I don't want to deal with it. That's just the mind monkey going. The wisdom understands that, and through compassion tries to teach and help things be better. But it's kind of like breathing. It's not like I am going to help people, because nothing is worse than a missionary ego. It's almost as bad as a spiritual ego. Somebody who, as the Zen masters used to say, they love to create pictures of rice cakes, glorious pictures of rice cakes, but you can't eat them. They're not nourishing. So if you live in the subduction zone, start thinking about how to prepare and make your cities prepared for it. If you live in the Mississippi Basin, start pressuring, because you're going to get hit not once but twice. There's another eclipse 7 years later that comes right over the New Madrid 100%, not 95, but 100%, in April 2024. It will come out of Mexico, kind of up rather than down through the country. And it's, so New Madrid's going to be hit with 2 5-year periods. So I consider it the most threatened area. Start retrofitting your buildings. start preparing and use awareness. Same with South Carolina. And, you know, same for the Japanese. This time, with the technologies we have now, you'll have an 8-hour warning from the news to get to high ground, like your ancestors could not do. And the other important thing that I talk about in the book is the danger of Fukushima being hit by those tidal waves again. Not that it'll be destroyed, because they've really built quite a fortress around it. My brother actually worked in Ground Zero on the filtration systems.
How's he doing?
Oh, he's good. He's not glowing in the dark.
Good. Okay.
It was a completely lead encased office area where they did it, and it was the sludge filters for the water and the nuclear sludge.
Did he have like a Geiger counter with him?
Oh yeah, in fact, he was very, being a Gemini, he loves to move. He was always checking it, and he always managed to find the spot where the least Roentgens were coming, you know. But yeah, I mean, he went there and worked there for about a month. Now, the danger I have feelings for is all of those flimsy containers of water being stacked and stacked and stacked behind there. The waves could wash all of that into the Pacific, and that could cause more trouble. This ongoing nuclear disaster that still hasn't really been addressed, although it's not as hair on fire crazy yet as a lot of people on internet who don't know how to read Geiger counters have said, where they go, oh, don't go in the water, LA water, your hair will fall out and your nails will fall out and all that. No, it's not that bad yet, but it could get that bad if damage from a major tidal wave should come and hit Fukushima from us in the Northwest. So I talk about that too in the book. The other book to get is John Hogue's Worldwide Astrological Predictions. I mean, you can see that at HogueProphecy.com. That's HogueProphecy.com. And the other thing, so you check all those books, and of course, Trump Strikes Syria. I just want to say one important message in that book. I try to teach my readers what the news is not telling them. For instance, it is amazing how no one understands why the North Koreans are building bombs. What's their motivation? No one understands that this is not an unstable nation when it's been under the Kims since 1945, which means it has a more sustained Soviet system than Castro in Cuba. So that's another myth. The other thing is that, just briefly, that America has told the North Koreans since 1950, they have been under an existential threat where we have reserved the right at any time to use our nuclear weapons against them. The only reason why the North Koreans, and that's not just the Kim regime, if you're going to use your nuclear weapons, you're going to kill 25 million North Koreans. It unites them behind the madman. It doesn't get them against him. The other thing is that we were supposed to leave, like the Chinese did, and resolve this thing after the armistice in 1953. Instead, we stayed there, even though the Chinese withdrew, and we added 500 nuclear weapons stockpiled up till 1989 on South Korean Peninsula. We have since taken those away, but imagine, if you will, if Russia was on our border, and Russia and Europe and the Warsaw Pact or whatever every year did major decapitation rehearsals where they would wipe out Washington and then invade and occupy America and establish their regime over the Americans. And they had a lot of nuclear weapons and we didn't have any. But we had a friend for a while during another Cold War that would be our umbrella. They collapsed, and that's what the Soviets were for so many decades. I mean, the question is, why did the Koreans start building atomic weapons in 1990, early 90s? Because the Soviet Union had collapsed, and their protection, they were exposed to the very same Americans under Truman, who was, MacArthur wanted him to use nukes, didn't get them, but he pressed him really hard. Eisenhower, one of the reasons why they came to the table to talk is that Eisenhower said if he was elected president, he would use atomic weapons on the North Koreans. They're not a nuclear power. And since we are a country that talks about peace, but actually use them to show our power, we incinerate Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which were defenseless cities. At the end of the war, when the Japanese were already on the ground, and we kick them. And then we have this myth that that ended the war. No, it didn't. It was a Soviet invasion of Manchuria that made the Japanese go, okay, jig's up. Wasn't that? But you're not taught that in your school papers. It doesn't work with the propaganda. So anyway, the thing is, there's a whole lot of things that we don't know, that if we knew why they're doing what they're doing, we could then respond peacefully. And that's why you're not being taught that, because the military industrial complex wants to create another small regional Cold War over the North Korean thing. They like to keep this thing going on forever and make trillions of dollars doing it by arming the South Koreans, etc. This is you probably don't know that Kim Jong-un said, we will stop our program, freeze our tests, if you guys stop these maneuvers, these decapitation maneuvers, and these quasi-invasion nuclear wars that you're going to practice against us every year. You stop that, we'll stop the tests. That seems fair enough. If we just say, hey, we'll start the tests again if another missile's launched, it's like, take the tension down, because if it goes off, you're going to lose a major economy, maybe even the Chinese. The Chinese and the South Koreans are major economic powers. They will be disrupted by this war. Millions will be killed on the Korean Peninsula. It's a very tight battlefield. There will be, the North Koreans have the power to launch on Japan and Okinawa. You will see tens of thousands of Americans killed, troops. More people will be lost in a few weeks than all the wars after World War II in our country. You will see an economic depression, chaos in the world. You will all be impacted by this war in Little Korea. So that's why I had to stop what I was doing in April. I had to stop work on my President Trump predictions book. Since then, I'm resuming it again, and do this book out of nowhere. Because just like in 2014, whenever things happen in prophecy and it changes the gestalt of things, I have to write a book and get people out there about the Cold War that's coming in now. So I highly recommend you read it, so that you would at least know what our so-called enemies are really thinking. You will then be informed, and when you're informed, you can change the future for better.
Right on. Absolutely. Knowledge is power. Let's know the past so we can change the future, not have the same outcome. Once again, John, a real honor. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't wait to speak to you again. And I'd also like to thank everybody else that showed up. Make sure to check out John's website, johnhogue.com.
No, it's
correct.
Hogue.
Johnhogue.com.
No. HogueProphecy.com. All one word. HOGUEPROE. Yeah. Hogue Prophecy.
Nanny. As soon as I said that, we started having internet gremlins jump in. So Hogue Prophecy. Yeah. One word. Hogue Prophecies.
Hogue.
Real honor, John. Hogue. 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 Prophecy.com. Yeah. Thank you. It was an honor, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I wrote a book called President Trump, Trump for President, Astrological Predictions, over a year before he was elected. I looked at his astrology when everybody in the summer of 2015 thought he was a clown. And I said, no, this man's got the destiny chart. He is, if he can survive all the Republicans and take them down, 17 he's competing with. And if he can get to the 8th of November, 2016, Election Day, I have never seen, in all the times I've done popular vote elections or presidential predictions since 1968, I have not seen anyone with better astrology to win an upset victory. So I wrote that, and it did happen. It was an odd year, because usually since 68 I've been making presidential predictions by the popular vote. I'm still 13-0, even though Hillary Clinton didn't win, and also was correct about Trump being the upset.
So I'm having some opportunities with my internet. It seems like when I do some really good interviews sometimes, I don't know what happens, but the internet gremlins come out. So I'm turning my video off. Please leave yours on, but it's the amount of bandwidth. So you predicted Trump becoming president.
Yes.
And, you know, it's interesting because certainly I was under the conclusion that absolutely it was a shoe-in for Hillary. And, you know, I think most people did as well. And you can see the media now, how they kind of paint this picture of him being this clown and stuff like that. But he certainly, I feel, had a rhyme to the reason of his madness. And what we see now is the media is just painting a picture of him being this horrible president. His statistics are terrible, supposedly. But where do they get these statistics? States will have a solar eclipse draw its mysterious darkness of 90 to 100% totality over 4 of some of America's most dangerous seismic and tsunami generating quake zones. They are the Cascadia subduction zone, the Pacific Ocean along the Oregon, Washington, and British Columbian coasts, and dormant supervolcano Yellowstone National Park, which has been acting crazy lately, ladies and gentlemen. It's been going off the charts. So it is going to be very interesting to see what happens based upon recent patterns over the past 20 years. If there's repeated events, it could get hairy very, very fast. John, it is an absolute honor to speak with you. How the heck are you? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, doing pretty good. I just released that book this weekend, The Great American Eclipse, Earthquake and Tsunami. And to answer your question you put out in the beginning, the Trump book was an unexpected literary child that I had to birth in 3 weeks, to birth a 55,000-word book after Trump struck Syria. At the same time, over chocolate cake with the Chinese president, he was talking about the first of 3 now aircraft carrier strike groups that are now surrounding North Korean peninsula. And how this is a lot of the subplot of that story is Trump's struggle with being his own man versus the deep state that wants to make him be their poodle, basically. With Hillary Clinton, she was a very eager and their first choice to be their puppet in the White House. Trump was not in the plan. And given that,
I mean, they're probably having a big influence on the numbers as well, I would assume, because 6 corporations control 90% of the media. So do you see it getting real hairy? Like in the Korean Peninsula, did you see that as well in the stars? What's going on with that?
Well, in my John Hogue's Worldwide Astrological Predictions, which looks at the stars day by day, all the way through May of next year, and the amazing convergence of portentous astrology that's happening this very moment in August, relates powerfully to Trump's natal chart. It has the conjunction or the magnification of energies right over his ascendant, this eclipse on the 21st of August in Leo, that takes his Leo rising, the way he is viewed by the world and the way the press views him, the way he expresses himself in the world, is going to be tremendously impacted. So the possibilities are many. I've often said, even in that first Trump book, that he could at any moment, with his Uranus that is right on his sun at birth, he could at any moment do, I call him Mr. Surprise, Surprise, Surprise. He's kind of Gomer piling his way through the presidency, because he will never be predictable. That is consistent about him. And it's very possible he could do a 180 as he did by striking Syria. He could do a 180 and just say, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving, and resign. That's one possibility. It's highly likely. The other is that the things that are about to hit this country, you mentioned a couple of the seismic areas. The other 2, after Yellowstone and the Pacific Northwest, because of the subduction zone, is the New Madrid fault line in the Mississippi Basin. That area is populated by millions of people. St. Louis, Memphis, large-scale cities, major transport routes and hubs for connecting the entire country. It is completely unprepared for a quake. And if we had a resumption of what happened at the end of 1811 into 1812, 7.5 to 8.3 magnitude earthquakes in a intraplate zone, which means it's an old crust of the earth, so it resonates over a wide-ranging area. In 1812, the Boston church bells were ringing automatically just from the shaking of that. It was actually shaking the bells in Boston. Similarly, down in South Carolina, that's where the eclipse leaves. That's the only active seismic zone on the eastern seaboard. It, in 1886, had a quake of about 7.8, I believe. And it impacted devastated areas from a 60-mile radius around Charleston. It was also felt all the way into Cuba. It's a similar intraplate situation. So now we're looking at a country that is far more populated, far more built up, with far more brick and mortar possibilities. I mean, even back in 1811 when the first...
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, how the heck are you? We're getting ready to go live here. I'm going to have to hit the mute button in just 1 second. We have a legend with us today, ladies and gentlemen. An absolute legend. In 3, 2, 1. All right. Rex Bear Leak Project. John Hogue. This guy is an absolute legend. Seriously. He's been on Discovery Channel, History Channel, written multiple books, and he is spot on with his predictions. What we're going to be discussing is the Great American Eclipse, the earthquake and tsunami possibilities, his worldwide astrological predictions. Trump strikes Syria and North Korea is a work that he is, I don't know if it's came out yet or it's coming out here in just a moment. And also Nostradamus and the Antichrist, codenamed Mobus. Now, for those of you that haven't heard of John before, I'm sure most of you have. He is a rogue scholar, world-renowned authority on Nostradamus and other prophetic traditions. His work is critically acclaimed for cutting through the social, religious, and nationalistic projections of prophets and their interpreters. Now, also a futurist, accurate forecaster, and creator of HogueProphecy.com, which is termed the Huffington Post of prophecy websites. Mr. Hogue has received wide international recognition, appearing on over 150 television and 1,000 blog and talk radio shows on 5 continents. Wow, what a resume. Now, check this out real quick. This is an excerpt from the Great American Eclipse, Earthquake and Tsunami. Total solar eclipses seem to trigger seismic events upon the lands and seas their shadows touch. On 21st of August, 2017, the lower 48